The ground trembled beneath her bare feet, not with the howling wind, but with the hunger of 7 beasts. No one else felt it, no one else heard it. But for Ayla, the deaf elder of Yakutia, the icy vibration of the earth screamed a warning. They were coming. Her eyes, accustomed to the white vastness, fixed on the horizon, where the impending blizzard was not the only darkness approaching. And what she did next would decide the fate of everyone. Ayla's heart, a silent drum, beat with an urgency only she could feel. The village, asleep and vulnerable, trusted her keen perception that transcended hearing. Her thin lips tightened. Warning them would be too slow for the speed of the danger. The blizzard, already beginning to paint the sky a heavy grey, would soon swallow any sign. There was no time for explanations, for the fear that would spread among the younger ones. The decision, heavy as the stones of the frozen river, formed. She would go alone. Her wrinkled but still agile fingers touched the icy ground, feeling the reverberation of the threat, now closer, more intense. 7 wild hearts, 7 masses of flesh and fury, moving with a hunger that Yakutia's extreme winter made insatiable. Ayla knew that the scent of the reindeer, her and the village's sustenance, was an irresistible invitation for the predators. She could not allow them to reach the unprotected herd. With a sigh that turned to vapor in the cold air, Ayla stood up. There was no time for the comforting warmth of the hut. She donned her heavy bearskin coat, worn from years of use, but still offering a formidable barrier against the cold. She tied her seal leather boots, whose thick soles were perfect for the slippery ice. In her hand, the staff, polished by time and the touch of her hands, seemed an extension of her own will. It was not a weapon, but a guide, a support. She stepped out of the hut, the door creaking, a sound she could not hear, but felt in the vibration of the wood. The wind whipped her face, bringing with it the first heavy snowflakes. Visibility was rapidly diminishing. Ayla did not hesitate. Her steps, surprisingly firm for her age, led her towards the reindeer corral, where the animals, restless, already sensed the change in the air. A premonition that old Ayla understood so well. As she approached, she saw the herd, over 200 reindeer, grouped together, their breaths forming white clouds in the biting cold. Their large brown eyes, accustomed to darkness and snow, revealed growing anxiety. Ayla moved among them, gently touching the animals' flanks, conveying a calm she herself struggled to maintain. She needed to guide them, not to the village, which would be an easy target, but to the mountains, to the treacherous gorge that only she knew. Ayla knew the journey would be arduous. The gorge was a labyrinth of frozen rocks and narrow passages where thin ice covered deadly traps. But it was also the only path that would offer any chance against the bears. She needed to be faster, more cunning, more connected to the earth than they were. Her deafness, which isolated her from the world of sounds, sharpened her other senses, making her one with the environment. She felt the wind whispering secrets in the rocks, the ice singing beneath her feet, the earth vibrating with life and death. With a gentle gesture of her staff, Ayla indicated the direction. The reindeer, trusting their silent guardian, began to move, their strong hooves breaking the freshly fallen snow. The old woman, with the weight of her village on her shoulders and the promise of a future in her hands, plunged into the growing darkness, a small point of courage against the relentless vastness of Yakutia. The blizzard intensified, a white veil covering the world, and Ayla knew that the polar bears, giant and hungry, were right behind. The race for life had begun. The race for life had begun. Ayla felt the permafrost vibrate with the heavy steps of the bears, a cadence of approaching threat. The blizzard, a white maelstrom, swallowed the world, but not her perception. She guided the reindeer with the certainty of one who knows every crevice, every change in the terrain. Her eyes read the shadows, her feet felt the ice and snow, alerting her to invisible dangers. The reindeer, over 200 of them, moved with agility, following the old woman. Their muzzles exhaled vapor into the glacial air. They trusted her, a silent trust built over countless winters, but 7 giant polar bears were an unprecedented threat. Ayla felt the fear in the animals' tense muscles, in the way they huddled together, seeking protection in proximity. The gorge opened up, a rocky, narrow throat where the wind howled with fury. Its steep, ice-covered walls rose to the sky, offering a treacherous passage, but also refuge. Ayla knew that there the bear's size advantage would be mitigated. Her cunning could shine. She needed to use every turn, every ledge, every layer of thin ice to her advantage. The vibration of the ground intensified. The bears were at the entrance to the gorge. Ayla felt their rage and hunger, a primal wave. She raised her staff to signal. The lead reindeer, the most experienced, understood. They quickened their pace, their hooves breaking the thin ice that covered a section of the path. Ayla had chosen the spot with precision. The ice, though it would support the reindeer, was a trap for heavier creatures. The lead bear, a mountain of white fur, emerged from the blizzard, its yellow eyes glinting. It stopped, sensing the fragility of the ice. The other 6 bears huddled behind, growling. Ayla felt their hesitation, a small victory. She moved with urgency, urging the reindeer forward. The cold penetrated her bones, but adrenaline kept her body warm, her mind sharp. She needed more time. Ayla spotted a narrow, almost imperceptible crevice in the rock. With a swift movement, she threw a piece of dried meat from her pouch into the crevice. The scent, even faint, would be irresistible. The lead bear, driven by hunger, sniffed the air. It hesitated again, dividing its attention between the fleeing herd and the aroma. Ayla knew it was a risk. The bear might ignore the bait or become more furious, but she counted on the predator's instinctive nature. Hunger in that cruel winter was a relentless master. She watched, feeling the vibrations of the ground. The lead bear, with a deep growl, began to investigate the crevice, its massive claws trying to reach the meat. The other bears, confused, stopped, watching their leader. Ayla seized the distraction, guiding the reindeer deeper into the gorge, each step an echo of hope. The maneuver had worked for now. The maneuver had worked for now. Ayla felt momentary relief, a pause in the relentless pursuit. But the vibration in the permafrost soon told her that the distraction would not last. The lead bear, though intrigued by the meat, would not forget the greater prize. The other 6 bears, impatient, began to move, circling around the leader who was still sniffing the crevice. Ayla knew she had only precious seconds. With an urgent wave of her staff, she urged the reindeer further into the gorge. The path became narrower, the rock walls higher, almost touching in places. The wind, channeled by the passage, howled like an ancestral spirit, whipping snowflakes and ice against Ayla's wrinkled face. She felt the cold penetrate her furs, but her will was a fire that burned strong in her chest. The reindeer's hooves echoed a muffled sound in the snow, a frantic rhythm of escape. Ayla, in the midst of the herd, felt the trepidation of each animal, their panting breath, the scent of fear mixed with the smell of snow. She touched the flanks of the nearest reindeer, a soft yet firm touch, conveying her own determination. Her eyes, even with visibility reduced by the blizzard, read the terrain with a precision that age had not diminished. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet changed. Ayla felt the transition from solid ice to a thinner layer, almost imperceptible beneath the fresh snow. It was a natural trap, a sheet of ice suspended over a shallow but dangerous abyss. She had foreseen this. With a swift movement, she directed the reindeer to a slightly different route, more to the right, where the rock offered a safer, though steeper, foothold. The lead bear, finally giving up on the bait, let out a deep growl that Ayla felt vibrate through the ground and into her bones. It was coming, and the others followed closely. Ayla felt the urgency of the threat, the proximity of the fury. She looked back into the white darkness of the blizzard and saw the massive silhouettes of the predators emerging, white ghosts in the storm. Their hearts beat with a hunger that seemed to consume the very air. Ayla needed one more distraction, something to delay them long enough for the reindeer to cross the most dangerous part of the gorge. Her eyes swept the surroundings, searching for an opportunity. She saw a pile of loose stones, precariously balanced on the slope. With an effort that made her muscles protest, she climbed a small rise, her staff planted in the ice for support. With gloved hands, Ayla began to push the smaller stones, one by one, downwards. The sound, which she could not hear, would be enough. The stones rolled, gaining speed, and soon a small avalanche of snow and rocks tumbled down the slope, partially blocking the narrow path. The bears, caught by surprise, stopped again, growling in frustration. Ayla felt the vibration of the earth as they tried to bypass the obstacle, losing precious time. Her breath was ragged, her lungs burned with the icy air. Ayla felt a sharp pang in her shoulder, a reminder of age and effort. But there was no time for weakness. The life of her village depended on every step, every decision. She descended from the rise, her body trembling, and continued to guide the reindeer, who now moved with a new urgency, sensing the proximity of safety, or perhaps just the proximity of old Ayla, who was their compass and their shield. The gorge opened slightly ahead, promising slightly wider terrain, but the threat was still very close. Ayla felt that the true test of her courage was yet to come. The gorge opened slightly ahead, promising slightly wider terrain, but the threat was still very close. Ayla felt that the true test of her courage was yet to come. The more open space, while offering the reindeer more freedom to run, also gave the giant polar bears a speed advantage that Ayla could not ignore. The blizzard, now at its peak, transformed the world into a white blur, where only Ayla's keen intuition could discern the path. Her feet, despite growing exhaustion, continued to find their rhythm in the deep snow. She felt the bear's vibrations intensify, no longer a distant threat, but a palpable presence right behind her. The growls, which she could not hear, resonated in her chest like muffled thunder, a growing pressure that propelled her forward. The reindeer, sensing the change in terrain and the predator's proximity, ran with a silent panic, their wide eyes reflecting fear. Ayla noticed a depression in the terrain, a natural basin covered by an older, thicker layer of ice, surrounded by low rocks. It was a dangerous spot, but also an opportunity. She needed to concentrate the bears, separate them, even if only for a brief moment. With renewed effort, she directed the reindeer to the edge of the basin, keeping them on a path that skirted the more treacherous ice in the center. The lead bear, driven by its relentless hunger, was the first to emerge from the curtain of snow. Its eyes, like yellow embers, fixed on the reindeer. It accelerated, its colossal mass moving with surprising agility. The other 6 bears followed, a white wave of fury. Ayla felt the impact of their steps on the permafrost, a strong and incessant beat. With her heart pounding, Ayla waited. She needed the leader to commit. When it was a few meters from the edge of the basin, she made a quick and unexpected move. From her pouch, she took a small piece of seal skin, which she had saved for emergencies, and threw it forcefully into the center of the ice basin. The scent, even faint, was potent for the bears' sensitive noses. The leader stopped abruptly, sniffing the air. The seal's skin was a tempting diversion, an easier and more immediate prey than the moving reindeer. Its hesitation was what Ayla needed. It took a few cautious steps onto the ice, testing the surface. The other bears, confused by the leader's sudden stop, began to group together, some trying to bypass it to continue the pursuit, others sniffing the new distraction. Ayla felt the tension in the air, a mix of fury and animal curiosity. She knew the sealskin wouldn't keep them occupied for long, but it was enough to create a small window. With an energetic wave of her staff, she urged the reindeer out of the basin, onto a path that sloped gently upwards, leading to an area of more rocky and uneven terrain, less conducive to the bear's speed. Exhaustion began to manifest in every fiber of her being. Her muscles ached, and the cold seemed more intense now that the adrenaline had subsided a little. But the image of her village, of her grandchildren's faces, of every life that depended on those reindeer, was a balm for her pain. She was the silent guardian, and her will to protect was unyielding. As the reindeer climbed, Ayla looked back. The lead bear was now in the center of the basin, sniffing the seal skin, but its attention was already returning to the herd. Its growls, now closer, were a promise of renewed danger. The other bears, impatient, began to move again. Ayla knew that the next phase of the pursuit would be even more brutal. The rocky terrain ahead would offer new opportunities and new dangers. She gripped her staff, feeling the cold, familiar wood in her hands. Ayla was ready for whatever came. The gorge opened slightly ahead, promising slightly wider terrain, but the threat was still very close. Ayla felt that the true test of her courage was yet to come. The path now wound among gigantic stones, some covered with frozen moss, others bare and slippery beneath the snow. The reindeer, with their adapted hooves, managed to find purchase in the crevices and ledges, but the pace was slower and the effort greater. Ayla felt the tension in the animal's muscles, the fatigue that was beginning to set in after hours of incessant flight. The bear's growls, which Ayla felt as deep vibrations in the ground, became more frequent and intense. They were frustrated by the uneven terrain, which hindered their speed and forced them into clumsy maneuvers. Ayla, however, saw every obstacle as a potential advantage. She guided the herd through a natural labyrinth of rocks, choosing the narrowest passages where the bears' massive bodies would struggle to pass. A particularly treacherous stretch presented itself, a steep ramp, almost a wall of ice and rock, with a single narrow crevice in the middle, barely wide enough for one reindeer to pass at a time. Ayla knew it was a dangerous bottleneck, but also a chance to create a barrier. With a silent cry of encouragement, she urged the reindeer up the ascent. The animals, trusting their leader, began to climb, their hooves scraping on the ice, their bodies tense. Ayla felt the bears approaching. The leader, with renewed fury, tried to climb the lower rocks, its enormous claws seeking purchase but slipping on the ice. The other bears spread out, looking for an alternative passage, but the rocky gorge was unforgiving. Ayla knew she had to be quick. She needed to block the crevice after the reindeer passed. With the last reindeer through the crevice, Ayla positioned herself. Her eyes swept the ground, searching for something. She saw a large, loose stone, almost the size of a small sled, precariously lodged atop a ledge. It was too heavy to move alone, but with her staff, perhaps. She planted her staff in the snow and ice, using it as a lever. With all the strength she had left, Ayla pushed. The stone gave way with a dull groan, rolling down the slope and falling with a heavy thud, blocking the entrance to the crevice. The sound, which she could not hear but felt the reverberation in the ground, was accompanied by furious growls from the bears. They were just meters away, and the barrier, though temporary, would stop them. Ayla felt relief, but also the exhaustion that hit her like an icy wave. Her knees buckled for an instant, but she regained her composure. The lead bear, furious, slammed its paws against the stone, trying to move it, but it was useless. Ayla felt the animal's rage, a wave of heat that contrasted with the biting cold. The other bears, now completely blocked, began to howl, a sound Ayla felt as a deep tremor in the earth. They were trapped, at least for a while. Ayla looked at the reindeer, who now moved at a calmer, though still hurried, pace out of the rocky gorge. The landscape began to open onto a snow-covered plateau, where visibility was slightly better despite the blizzard. But the plateau was also a place where the bears, if they managed to bypass the barrier, would have the advantage of speed again. Ayla knew the stone wouldn't hold them for long. The bears were persistent, and their hunger was a powerful engine. She needed to find the next refuge, the next natural trap. Her eyes, tired but determined, swept the white horizon. The village seemed a distant memory, but the promise of its warmth and safety was what kept her moving. She felt the cold penetrate her furs, the pain in her muscles, but the connection to the earth, to the reindeer, to her village, was stronger than any pain. Ayla was the guardian, and she would not fail. She continued to guide the reindeer, her steps firm, her staff pointing the way. The plateau stretched ahead, a white and treacherous sea, but Ayla was ready to navigate it. The true test of her cunning and resilience was only just beginning. The plateau stretched ahead, a vast expanse of white, deceptively flat, yet fraught with hidden dangers. Ayla, her breath fogging in the icy air, felt renewed urgency in the reindeer's steps. They were faster here, but so would the bears be if they bypassed the rock blockade. Her eyes, squinting against the swirling snow, swept the horizon for any landmark, any depression or elevation that could offer a momentary advantage. The blizzard, though still fierce, seemed to thin slightly in this open space, revealing glimpses of a leaden-grey sky, heavy with more snow. Ayla felt the ground beneath her boots, a constant reading of the vibrations. The bears were moving again. The tremor was more diffuse, indicating that they might be spreading out, trying to bypass the stone. This was dangerous. A lone bear was a threat, but 7 coming from different directions could encircle the herd. She needed to keep the reindeer together, a cohesive body against the predator's fury. She guided the herd at a steady pace, her own muscles protesting with every step. Fatigue was a cold mist that tried to envelop her mind, but the image of her village, of her grandchildren's faces, was an inner sun that kept her from yielding. She was the guardian, and her strength came from the earth and the generations of her people. Suddenly, a different vibration, deeper and more resonant, ran through the permafrost. It was not the bear's footsteps, but something more primal, a murmur from the earth itself. Ayla stopped abruptly, raising her staff, a silent signal to the reindeer. The animals, sensing the change in their guardian, also stopped, their large brown eyes fixed on her, seeking guidance. The air grew heavy, and a pressure in her ears, which Ayla felt, echoed across the landscape. Then, the ground trembled violently. It was not a prolonged tremor, but a single powerful jolt that made the ice groan and the snow rise in clouds. A dry, cracking sound, which Ayla felt in every bone, tore through the air. Before her, in the middle of the seemingly solid plateau, a gigantic crevice opened. The ice, once compact, now split in an irregular line, revealing a dark, deep abyss from which icy vapor rose. The crevice stretched for dozens of meters, dividing the reindeer's path and cutting off their escape route. Panic erupted among the reindeer. Some, the youngest and most inexperienced, reared up, their hooves scraping on the ice, their bodies trembling. The herd split, some running to the right of the crevice, others to the left, desperately seeking a safe passage. Ayla found herself in the midst of the chaos, her heart aching at the sight of the fragmented herd. The crevice was too wide to jump, and its edges, sharp as blades, were a deadly threat. The lead bear, which had found a faster passage than Ayla expected, emerged from the blizzard at a dangerous distance, its eyes fixed on the reindeer's confusion. It let out a deep growl, which Ayla felt as a thud in her chest, and quickened its pace. The other bears, following it, also spotted the crevice and the divided herd. Realizing the new advantage the earth offered them, Ayla needed to act. The crevice, though an obstacle for the reindeer, was an even greater barrier for the bears, if she could use it. But the herd was divided, and time was rapidly running out. She felt the urgency in her blood, the cold of Yakutia, the warmth of her will. Her eyes, quick and calculating, swept over both halves of the herd, and then the crevice. An idea, risky and audacious, began to form in her mind. She needed to gather the reindeer, but there was no time to go around the crevice. She would have to cross. Ayla looked at the part of the herd that was closest to the bears, the one running to the right. She needed to protect them. With a silent cry of determination, she planted her staff in the ice and began to move, not towards safety, but towards danger, towards the edge of the crevice, where the ice seemed most unstable. She had to find a way to gather the herd and at the same time use the crevice against the predators. Ayla's heart pounded, but her mind was clear. The true test of her cunning and resilience was only just beginning. Ayla, with surprising agility, assessed the crevice. Jumping it was impossible. To her right, however, a stretch of rock and ice formed a natural bridge, narrow and unstable. It was an immense risk, but the reindeer to the right were dangerously exposed to the bears, whose growls Ayla felt as violent thuds in her chest. She planted her staff in the ice, testing the bridge. The ice groaned. Holding her breath, Ayla crossed, her feet finding every foothold with ancestral precision. Every step was an act of faith. Her eyes, fixed on the divided herd, conveyed a calm she barely possessed. On the other side, Ayla raised her staff, signaling urgency. The reindeer, recognizing their guardian, regrouped, their hesitant movements becoming a coordinated run. Ayla directed them to higher ground, away from the crevice, where the snow was deeper and the ice more solid. The bears, however, were not foolish. The leader, with its brutal intelligence, perceived the crevice as a funnel. It and two other bears ran along the edge, seeking a narrower point. The other four, slower, sniffed the abyss, confused. Ayla felt the approach of the main trio, a wave of fury that made her tremble. She needed to isolate the leader. Her eyes swept the crevice, noticing the bridge weakened by the previous tremor. The weight of a giant bear would be fatal for it. With renewed breath, Ayla guided the reindeer away, but she herself moved with determination to the edge of the bridge. The lead bear, seeing her there, seemed to understand her intention. It let out a deep growl, which Ayla felt like thunder, and accelerated directly towards the precarious bridge. It was now or never. Ayla waited, her heart pounding frantically. When the lead bear placed its massive front paws onto the bridge, Ayla plunged her staff into the ice with all her might. Not to push, but to create a vibration, a resonant impact on the already compromised structure. The ice groaned, cracked, and with a deafening snap that Ayla felt throughout her body, the bridge gave way. The lead bear, caught by surprise, fell into the crevice with a thud that made the earth tremble again. It was not a fatal fall, but the crevice was deep enough to trap it, its claws scratching at the ice in desperation. Its growls, muffled and full of fury, rose from the abyss. The other two bears stopped abruptly, shocked. They growled in confusion, looking at the abyss and at Ayla, standing panting but victorious. The other four bears, still distant, felt the tremor and the altered growls, and their pursuit faltered. Ayla felt immense, but brief, relief. The leader was trapped, but not for long. It was strong. The crevice would not be a permanent prison. She needed to buy more time. With an urgent wave of her staff, she urged the reindeer forward, to higher ground, away from the crevice and the confused bears. Her muscles burned, and the cold seemed to penetrate deeper into her bones, now that the adrenaline was subsiding. But the image of her village, the promise of life and warmth, was a beacon amidst the storm. She was the guardian, and every step was an act of love and sacrifice. Ayla continued to guide the reindeer, her eyes fixed on the white horizon, knowing that the fight was not yet over. The survival of her people depended on her unwavering will. Ayla continued to guide the reindeer, her eyes fixed on the white horizon, the struggle far from over. The survival of her people depended on her unwavering will. The brief relief from the lead bear's fall into the crevice soon dissipated. She felt the furious vibrations from the abyss, the giant climbing the slippery ice. The two nearby bears, confused, sniffed the edge, but the prey drew them. The other four, more distant, regrouped, resuming the pursuit. Ayla urged the reindeer to higher ground. Every step was a monumental effort for her tired body. The urgency in her chest was a tireless engine. The cold penetrated her furs, but determination warmed her. The more open plateau offered a gentle elevation, promising visibility and stable ice beneath the deep snow. Ayla needed to maximize every second. As the reindeer climbed, Ayla felt a new and disturbing vibration. The lead bear was making progress. The desperate scratching of its claws, the colossal thrust of its body, resonated in her bones. It was almost free. Ayla needed a new distraction. Her eyes swept the terrain. The blizzard created snow whirls in depressions. The wind, subtly shifting, carried the scent of the reindeer, but could also bring that of the bears. She spotted an area where the wind swept the snow, revealing frozen moss and lichen, exuding a strong, earthy scent when disturbed. It was a chance. With an energetic wave of her staff, Ayla directed the reindeer there. The animals, trusting, followed, their hooves kicking up clouds of snow and fragments of moss. Ayla, with her staff, scraped the ground forcefully. The scent, which she could not smell but imagined, would be intense enough to confuse the bears. The vibration of the lead bear intensified, and then, with a dull thud that Ayla felt like an electric shock, it managed to pull itself out of the crevice. It was free, furious, and more determined. The other two bears, seeing it, growled in recognition and joined it, eyes fixed on the herd. The remaining four bears, regrouped, sensed the leader's liberation and accelerated, forming a front of 7 relentless predators. Ayla felt the wave of fury approaching. The scent of moss and lichen, disturbed by the wind, spread. She felt the confusion in the bears' movements, a momentary hesitation as they tried to discern prey from the scent of the earth. It was a small victory, a breath of time. But Ayla knew it wouldn't be enough. Their hunger was greater than any olfactory distraction. She looked at the reindeer, who now moved with new energy, sensing Ayla's unwavering will. The plateau stretched ahead. Ayla knew that the next pursuit would require cunning and sacrifice. The terrain sloped, leading to small hills and valleys, with snow accumulated in treacherous drifts. Ayla felt the true test of her resilience was yet to come. She was ready. The village, her family, the lives of the reindeer, everything depended on her. And Ayla, the silent guardian, would not fail. Ayla, the silent guardian, would not fail. With a clear mind, despite her exhausted body, she urged the reindeer into the labyrinth of hills and valleys that opened ahead. The snow, accumulated in treacherous drifts, created a scene of icy beauty and imminent danger. Every rise, every depression, was an invitation to a new strategy or a fatal mistake. Ayla felt the ground beneath her boots, reading each vibration as if they were words in an ancient language. The bears, now reunited, moved with frightening synchronicity, a white, hungry mass that seemed to glide effortlessly across the landscape. The tremor of their steps was constant, a pulsating reminder of the threat. She guided the reindeer to the top of a steeper hill where the wind swept the snow, revealing a harder, slipperier ice surface. The reindeer, with their wide hooves, managed to keep their balance, but the bears, with their colossal mass, would have more difficulty. Ayla watched the herd, her keen eyes noting the animals' fatigue, but also the unwavering trust they placed in her. She was the compass, the silent voice that guided them through the storm. The lead bear, with its brutal cunning, perceived the maneuver. Instead of climbing the hill directly, it split off with 2 of its companions, circling the base of the rise, seeking an easier and faster passage. The other 4 bears continued to climb, their claws scraping the ice with a sound Ayla felt as a shiver down her spine. Ayla knew she was being flanked. Danger came from 2 directions. She needed to act fast, before the bears climbing the hill reached the top and the other three cut off their escape. Her eyes swept the valley ahead, noticing a series of large rocks, almost monoliths, that formed a natural corridor. Between them, snow accumulated in deep drifts, almost white walls. It was a risk, but also an opportunity. With an energetic wave of her staff, Ayla directed the reindeer into the rocky corridor, urging them into the snowdrifts. The animals hesitated for an instant, sinking into the soft, deep snow, but the urgency in Ayla's gesture made them move forward. The bears, climbing the hill, now closer, let out furious growls as they saw the reindeer disappear into the deep snow. They tried to accelerate, but the slippery ice and the incline slowed them down. Ayla felt the ground vibrate with the predators' fury, but also with the slowness of their movements. The three bears circling the hill, however, were faster. Ayla felt their approach, a wave of heat and danger that made her grip her staff tighter. They were approaching the end of the rocky corridor, ready to intercept the reindeer as they emerged from the deep snow. Ayla knew she needed more time. With the reindeer still struggling to cross the snowdrifts, she turned, facing the direction from which the three bears were approaching. Her eyes, tired but determined, fixed on a specific point, a large rock that jutted from the ground with a base of thin, cracked ice. It was a weak point, a natural trap she could use. With a monumental effort, Ayla ran to the rock, ignoring the pain in her muscles and the cold that burned her lungs. She planted her staff in the ice base, using it as an extension of her own will. With all the strength she had left, Ayla began to strike the cracked ice, not with the intention of breaking it completely, but of weakening it further, of creating an instability that the bears, with their weight, could not ignore. The ice groaned under the blows, and Ayla felt the vibrations spread, a silent warning to the predators. The three bears, now a few meters away, stopped abruptly. The leader, with a warning growl, sniffed the air and the ice, sensing the fragility of the surface. Ayla knew it was a risky bluff, but it was the only chance. She continued to strike, her movements firm, her gaze defiant. The village, her family, the lives of the reindeer, everything depended on her. And Ayla, the silent guardian, would not fail. Ayla continued to strike the cracked ice, each impact reverberating in her tired hands. The icy base groaned. The three bears halted, watched her. The leader sniffed the air, cunning eyes fixed on the elder, sensing the instability. It was a powerful bluff, sustained by her unwavering will. With a dry crack, Ayla felt the shock. Part of the ice beneath the rock gave way. Not a total collapse, but enough for the rock to tilt dangerously, releasing friction and a gush of icy water. The lead bear recoiled, growling hesitantly. The other two reared up, tense, the instinct of self-preservation overriding hunger. Ayla maintained her stance, staff planted, eyes defiant. She could not show weakness. The small victory gave the reindeer a breather as they struggled through the snowdrifts of the rocky corridor. Ayla felt the effort and the slowness, knowing she couldn't keep them there. The bears on the hill delayed, were approaching the summit. Ayla felt the tremor of their steps. Between two dangers, time was running out. The lead bear, after hesitating, let out a deep growl. It would not give up. Instead of attacking the rock, it moved laterally, circling the trap, keeping its distance. Its two companions followed. Ayla knew they would gain ground, soon joining the other bears approaching the summit. She needed to gather the herd and lead them to a place where the advantage was not with the predators. Her eyes swept the horizon, searching for a new path. The blizzard was clearing, revealing distant silhouettes of open hills and valleys. The terrain was treacherous, but Ayla trusted her intuition and connection to the earth. With a final strike, Ayla withdrew her staff. She turned and ran towards the reindeer, who were now emerging from the snowdrifts, exhausted but ready to follow. Ayla felt the pain in her muscles, the icy air burning her lungs. But urgency propelled her. She needed to be fast before the bears regrouped and encircled them. She reached the herd, her eyes conveying courage. With a wave of her staff, she directed them into a narrow valley between two hills. The valley seemed to offer protection from the wind and snow, and the terrain was more solid. It was a gamble, but Ayla didn't have many options. As she guided the reindeer into the valley, Ayla felt the ground vibrate with the bear's approach. The three she had delayed moved quickly, and the four from the hill were almost at the summit. Ayla felt the pressure, the encirclement closing in. But she also felt the strength of the reindeer, the unity of the herd, and her own resilience. The valley, though narrow, was longer than Ayla expected. The reindeer moved in single file, their steps echoing in the blizzard silence. Ayla, at the rear, felt the bears approaching, their furious growls now clearer, closer. She knew the real battle was yet to come. The valley was a passage, but it could also become a trap. She needed to find an exit, a new refuge before the predators cornered them. Ayla gripped her staff, determination etched on her tired face. She would not fail. Ayla gripped her staff, determination etched on her tired face. She would not fail. The narrow valley, which had promised refuge, now closed around her like a trap. The walls of ice and rock seemed to lean in, trapping the herd. The bears' growls, once distant, were now a guttural chorus that Ayla felt vibrate in her chest, in her bones, in every fiber of her being. The icy air seemed to pulse with the predator's fury. The reindeer, sensing imminent danger, moved with a silent frenzy, their hooves scraping on the ice with a sound Ayla felt as a continuous tremor. They were cornered. The valley's exit ahead was blocked by a high, impassable snow barrier accumulated by the wind. Turning back was impossible. The bears were already at the entrance, their massive bodies filling the passage. Ayla felt panic threaten her mind, but the image of her village, of her grandchildren's faces, was a shield against despair. She raised her staff, her eyes sweeping the valley in search of an exit, a chance, however small. Her gaze fixed on an area in the center of the valley where the ice seemed darker, smoother, covered by a thin layer of freshly fallen snow. It was a frozen lake, disguised by the blizzard, and Ayla felt the vibration of its fragility beneath her feet. The bears were approaching. The leader, with its terrifying, imposing presence, emerged from the snow mist, its eyes fixed on Ayla and the herd. It let out a growl that made the valley tremble. The other six followed closely, forming a relentless semicircle. Ayla knew it was now. She needed a desperate act. With a silent cry of determination, she planted her staff in the ice and directed the reindeer onto the frozen lake. The animals hesitated, instinct warning them of the thin ice's danger, but the urgency in Ayla's gesture, the trust in her eyes, propelled them forward. The reindeer, one by one, began to cross the ice, their wide hooves distributing their weight. But Ayla felt the ice groan beneath them, a melody of danger. She waited until most of the herd was on the other side, their hearts beating in unison with the ice. The lead bear, seeing the moving herd, quickened its pace, ignoring the lake's fragility, its hunger overcoming any caution. When the lead bear stepped onto the thin ice, Ayla acted. With superhuman effort, she plunged her staff with all her might into the weakest point she felt, not to break it, but to create a resonance, a shockwave that propagated across the lake. The ice cracked. Not a simple crack, but a network of fissures that spread rapidly, isolating the lead bear from the others and the herd. The lead bear, caught by surprise, sank chest deep into the icy water, its growls of fury and despair echoing through the valley. It tried to cling to the edges, its claws scratching at the ice that continued to break. The other six bears stopped abruptly, growling in confusion and frustration, unable to advance without falling into the newly formed crevice. Ayla, exhausted, felt her entire body protest. Her muscles burned, and the cold seemed to drain the last drop of energy from her bones, but the relief that washed over her was immense. The leader was trapped, and the herd was safe, at least for now. With a final wave of her staff, she urged the reindeer forward to the safety of more solid ground that rose beyond the lake. She turned, watching the lead bear struggle in the icy water, its growls now weaker, but still full of fury. The other bears, frustrated, began to disperse, seeking an alternative route, but the time Ayla had gained was precious. She felt a sharp pain in her shoulder, the result of extreme effort, but the satisfaction of having protected her herd, her village, outweighed any physical discomfort. Ayla, stumbling but with her head held high, continued to guide the reindeer away from the valley to safety. The blizzard began to subside, revealing a pale, almost white sky, promising a new day. True strength, she knew, lay not in what one hears, but in what one feels and in the unwavering will to protect life. The climax had passed, but the journey back home, wounded and exhausted, still awaited her. Ayla, stumbling but with her head held high, continued to guide the reindeer away from the valley to safety. The blizzard began to subside, revealing a pale, almost white sky, promising a new day. True strength, she knew, lay not in what one hears, but in what one feels and in the unwavering will to protect life. The climax had passed, but the journey back home, wounded and exhausted, still awaited her. Every step was a silent agony. Ayla's shoulder throbbed with a dull ache, and the cold, once an enemy to be fought, now seemed a seductive whisper of rest. But she could not rest. The herd, though safe from the bears, was still far from the village, and Yakutia, even with the blizzard subsiding, was a merciless place. Her eyes, which had guided the reindeer through danger, now sought the familiar contours of the distant mountains, a beacon of hope amidst the white vastness. She felt the reindeer's exhaustion, their slower steps, but also the trust they placed in her. Ayla raised her staff, no longer to ward off predators, but to propel herself and her charges forward. In the village, worry grew with each passing moment. The pale sun barely broke through the clouds, and Ayla had not returned. Old and young gathered, their faces etched with anxiety. Nikolai, the younger leader, organized search parties, his eyes fixed on the direction Ayla had taken. "She is strong," he said, more to himself than to the others. "But the blizzard and the bears—" His voice trailed off, fear tightening everyone's chests. Ayla was the guardian, the living memory of her people, and to lose her would be to lose a part of the village's soul. Hours passed, and the sky opened a little more, revealing an icy blue. It was then that a sharp cry cut through the cold air. "Reindeer! The reindeer are returning!" Nikolai and the others rushed to the edge of the village, their hearts beating in unison. And there they were, a dark, living mass against the infinite white, moving slowly but steadily towards safety. And at the rear, small and bent, but with an imposing presence, was Ayla. A collective sigh of relief and admiration swept through the village. The reindeer were safe. Ayla had succeeded. Nikolai was the first to reach her, his eyes moist. He saw her injured shoulder, her face etched with exhaustion, but determination still shone in her eyes. Ayla said nothing, she couldn't, but her gaze conveyed a story of courage and sacrifice that everyone could feel. The villagers approached, some crying, others with wide smiles. They touched Ayla, their gestures expressing gratitude and reverence. The children, who once saw her only as the silent elder, now looked at her with admiration, understanding the magnitude of her feat. Ayla, finally, allowed herself to relax. The weight of the staff seemed to slip from her hands, and she felt Nikolai's strong arms support her. The village was safe. The reindeer were saved. The winter would be bearable. She had fulfilled her promise. As she was carried to the warmth of her yurt, Ayla felt the vibrations of her people's footsteps, no longer of fear, but of celebration and unity. She had proven that true strength lay not in the voice one hears, but in the resilience of the spirit and the unwavering will to protect life. Ayla, the silent guardian, had spoken louder than any words. The conflict was resolved, and the village once again had found hope in the purest of hearts. Inside the warm yurt, the aroma of medicinal herbs and the gentle heat of the fire enveloped Ayla. Her eyes, once fixed on the icy vastness, now rested on the soft fur that covered her. Nikolai, with gentle hands, tended to her injured shoulder, applying compresses and ancestral ointments. The pain still throbbed, a vivid reminder of the battle, but it carried with it the sweetness of victory. Ayla felt the vibration of gratitude in every touch, in every careful gesture. She needed no words to understand the love and respect that surrounded her, a warmth that heated her soul. Outside, the village buzzed with renewed energy. The preparations for the celebratory feast, inaudible to Ayla, were a melody she felt in the ground, in the air, in the pulse of life. Children ran, their laughter echoing in the hearts of the adults. Men and women worked together, clearing snow and organizing the saved herd, whose satisfied lowing reached Ayla as a murmur of peace. The threat had passed, and with it, a new wave of unity and purpose swept through the community. Nikolai sat beside Ayla, holding her wrinkled hand. His eyes, full of reverence, conveyed what his voice could not. He described, through slow gestures, how the bears had dispersed after the leader's fall, still trapped in the crevice, and how the herd had been safely led to the corrals. Ayla nodded, each detail confirming what her body already knew. She felt Nikolai's admiration, the tacit understanding that her deafness was her greatest strength, a channel for keen perception. In the days that followed, Ayla's story spread like the wind across vast Yakutia. Not only in her village, but among neighboring clans, the deaf elder who faced 7 giant polar bears became a living legend, a beacon of courage. Her bravery was not measured by war cries, but by the quietness of her determination and her deep connection to the earth and its animals. The village children now followed her with curious eyes, seeking not only stories of her youth, but the silent wisdom she radiated. They learned to observe, to feel, to trust their instincts, to see beyond what eyes showed and ears heard, an invaluable legacy. Ayla, sitting at the door of her yurt on a pale, sunny day, watched the reindeer grazing peacefully on the snowy plain. Winter was still harsh, but the threat of hunger had been averted. The village would prosper, protected by the wisdom of its ancestors and the unwavering courage of an altruistic heart. She touched her staff, now a sacred symbol of her journey, feeling the marks of every blow, every moment of despair and triumph. The pain in her shoulder diminished, but the sense of purpose deepened, rooting itself within her. She closed her eyes, feeling the faint warmth of the sun and the vibrations of life pulsing around her, a silent symphony. Ayla had proven that true strength lay not in what one hears, but in what one feels, in the unwavering will to protect life, and in the deep human connection that binds a community. Her deafness, which once seemed a barrier, had become the channel for a deeper wisdom, a listening of the heart that saved everyone. The village, stronger and more united than ever, would flourish under the light of its silent heroine, a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit in icy Yakutia. Ayla had found her peace, the certainty that her legacy would live in the hearts of her people, guiding them through winters. Ayla had found her peace, the certainty that her legacy would live in the hearts of her people, guiding them through winters. And so it was. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, as Yakutia, relentless in its icy beauty, continued its cycle. Ayla, with her shoulder healed and her spirit lighter, became an even stronger pillar in the village, a silent beacon of resilience. Her yurt, once a refuge of quietude, was now a gathering place. The children especially were drawn to her presence. They sat at her feet, watching her weave willow baskets or mend reindeer harnesses, their small eyes fixed on every precise movement. They did not ask for stories aloud, for they knew Ayla would not hear them. Instead, they brought drawings of reindeer and bears, expressing in vibrant colors what their voices could not. Ayla, with a gentle smile, touched the drawings, feeling the intention, the admiration, the love that emanated from each childish stroke. She responded with slow, expressive gestures, teaching them the importance of feeling the ground, of observing the flight of ravens, of trusting the deep intuition that the earth itself offered them. Nikolai, the young leader, visited Ayla frequently. He brought not only food or firewood, but also the village's concerns, seeking the wisdom that Ayla radiated without words. In silence, he shared the challenges of hunting, decisions about the herd, tensions among the young people. Ayla, with a touch of her hand or a deep, understanding gaze, conveyed advice that went beyond logic, rooted in generations of experience and an unbreakable connection to the environment. He felt the strength in her wrinkled hands, the clarity in her eyes, and left her yurt with a renewed sense of purpose and direction. Ayla's story of the deaf elder who saved the village from the 7 giant bears was not just a legend, it was a living lesson for everyone. The hunters, venturing out into the white vastness, now looked at the ice with more respect, at the wind with more attention, remembering Ayla's keen sensitivity. The women, preparing meals or caring for children, spoke of her courage, drawing inspiration from her silent and unwavering strength. Ayla's deafness, which might once have been seen as a limitation, was now understood as the key to a deeper perception, a unique gift that connected her to the pulsating heart of Yakutia. The following winter brought new storms and challenges, as always, but the village did not succumb to fear. There was a new unity, a trust forged in adversity and triumph. When the snow fell heavily and the wind howled, the villagers gathered, not in panic, but in preparation, their eyes seeking Ayla, even if she was just sitting at the door of her yurt, feeling the vibrations of the world around her. Her example had taught them that true strength lay not in the voice one hears, but in the resilience of the spirit, in the unwavering will to protect one another, and in the deep connection that bound them as a large family. Ayla, watching the winter sun paint the horizon in pale, rosy hues, felt the pulse of life in her veins. The cold was still intense, but the human warmth that surrounded her was stronger and more enduring. She had fulfilled her promise not only to save the herd, but to revive the soul of her village, infusing it with hope. Her legacy would not just be the story of a heroic deed, but the seed of a new generation, taught to listen to silence, to feel the invisible, to protect life with unconditional love. Ayla, the silent guardian, smiled, a deep peace filling her being. The village's future, she knew, was secure, guided by the wisdom she had shared, an eternal echo of courage and love in icy Yakutia.